Hey everyone, welcome. What you see here is one of my cocoon nurseries that I bought an end to 8 days ago. So 8 days ago we took the last of the baby worms that had been hatched in that system, collected them up, and we put them into the main bin where that same type of worm lives. It's not even a bin, it's a bag. It's a VermiBag Tote suspended within a bin. And as you can see, this has the same collection of red wigglers, European night crawlers, and blue worms in it. This system is 80 some odd days old, maybe 86 I believe, and it has received 9 feedings so far. When we came in here 8 days ago to release those baby worms that we collected out of the nursery, we did look around because at that point it had been sitting on the shelf here for 10 days, composting. We thought that there might be a need for some food as long as we were going in here to release worms, but we found that there was plenty of leftovers and we left it. But now 18 days later, I figured maybe we would check in again, also because we did end up adding a lot of moisture. Even though we didn't add any food, we did add a lot of water because the material was awfully dry, and even if they don't need more food today, I would like to make sure that there's enough dampness in there if it needs it. So I'm going to get that system up on the bench and we're going to take a look. In the past I've always had this zip top cover closed, but it's my only system where I've got a cover like that, and it did seem like there was always a bunch of flying insects hanging out here. And I wondered if maybe changing a thing or two would result in fewer flying insects. So I thought last week that the thing that I would try changing is the lid being left open with only a plastic sheet covering things, more similar to the rest of my systems. And I guess the immediate observation I'm making is that I thought I saw a flying insect when we first opened the container, but that was the only one. So it does seem like the lid had actually become sort of a place that the flying insects were sort of using as a shelter, as a home, you know, and whatever. At this point, if it's only going to create a place for the bugs to hang out, I think I'm going to just stop using it. Alright, so I remember when we checked in here last time, we found leftovers of the last feeding. So yeah, 18 days, right? So the last check-in 8 days ago was really nothing more than a confirmation that there were sufficient leftovers to leave it be, and then we just added some worms. And well, at that point it had been working 10 days on trying to break down, let's see, there were chunks of banana peel, there were some pieces of bread, pie crust, a pizza pie crust. And usually with the bread, like with the pie crust, seems to me like the mold is what ends up taking care of the bread, not so much the worms. So the feeding would have been right down the middle. Even when we checked in on it, we found some leftovers, but we tried to reposition all the food that we found leftovers of back down into the middle, making it pretty easy when we come back in here to check on how it's coming along, figure out whether it needs more today. I just got this funny feeling that it probably is going to need some more. I guess the one thing I'm really glad to see is that the moisture level in here is much improved. I did find that along these longer edges, the one here and the one here, I don't know, maybe because it's not up against the plastic on these shorter edges, it does seem like the material sits right up against the plastic container outside, but on the you can even see I got my hand behind the bag over here. Same thing over here. Good bit of air comes and goes through there, I believe, allowing for some faster evaporation of the moisture in here. So just in anticipation of that ongoing evaporation, we did lay down extra moisture along those two edges that we thought would be continuing to suffer from being dry. And I gotta admit, over here, as I poke down a little bit, I do feel more dryness. Perhaps here, since we stuffed the lid in here, we've somehow obscured some of the airflow over there, but out here, on this other edge that you can't see over here, yeah, it does seem like a good bit of airflow is still continuing to come and go. But luckily that ample amount of moisture that we dumped in here last time 8 days ago does seem to have held up pretty good. So it's not totally dried out. It was a little bit dry, but not too bad. we've got a lot of nice stuff here, you know. A good amount of little bits of bedding scattered throughout the material everywhere. Some of this is like just a clumped up wad of paper towel. Be nice to see it a little bit more spread out. Yeah, I think things look pretty good in here. But it's really the question of whether we want to add food. My guess is yes. I would say that even if we find a couple little chunks of moldy bread or a little shred of leftover banana peel, like right here, I believe, it's not going to have much left to it. And it's probably a good time to come in here and give this system its 10th feeding at this point. We were prepared 8 days ago to add more food, if it seemed sensible to do so. And it didn't seem like we found a lot of food, you know. There wasn't like just a glut of leftovers, but for whatever reason, it just seemed to me like it would be a good idea to focus more on rehydration. And then just by doing so, we would stimulate the ongoing breakdown of the food scraps that had been placed in here for composting. Because without the moisture, it's not going anywhere. So it wasn't so much a problem with the food they'd received or anything. I believe it was more just that it had gotten a little bit too dry for them to want to hang out in. In fact, you know, when we did look at the food scraps that were in here, we found very few worms in there, but when we examined these two outer sides of the container where the moisture seems to remain in the material a lot more readily, we found all the worms hanging out there where the moisture was, not where the food was. This looks to me like another larger chunk of banana peel with the stem on it. But, you know, a couple little scraps of leftover like that date back almost 3 weeks. I think they'll just continue working this stuff down, and it's fair to say we could put in a nice fresh feeding in here. And it almost seems like we're not going to have to add moisture today. I bought my water bottle. It's right here. I got the spray wand all set to go with the assumption that we would need it, but it doesn't seem to me like we need it, which is a good thing. I'm not going to force that either. I'm not going to force water into here if it's not needed. But I was prepared to spray it down, and I kind of anticipated that we would have to, but it's kind of cool that we don't have to. That just means that we've been giving these little guys a good space to work in and live in, and hopefully they're going to continue with their hard work here. So I didn't want to predestine this check-in with it being a feeding. It was just going to be a check-in. I didn't want to pigeonhole it into needing to take the food, so I didn't bring anything down here. What do we got here? This little chunk of bread, maybe? Maybe this is just a little chunk of pizza dough? I'm not sure. I thought we might see a piece of that, but I don't think we have so far. Maybe it's gone. But yeah, I'm going to go grab a few things that we could throw in here to feed this system. We'll get these leftovers back into service too, but there certainly isn't much of them. So it seems like a timely check-in. So let's take a break now. I'll head up to the freezer, grab a few things for them, and then we'll regroup momentarily to get these little guys fed. Alright, so the stuff that I got for them is 2 days worth of coffee as well as the filters. So I think that those filters that we found resting out on top, will incorporate them down into the feeding area as bedding. So let me grab them right away. One of them had actually started falling apart in my hand, as you might have noticed. So these are a good thing to position down here. They're well seasoned, teeming with microbes for sure, and a nice carbon-rich complement to the foods that they're going to get today. So complement to the carbon-rich food at the bottom level is the nitrogen-rich coffee, 1 day's worth of coffee. And the stuff that you see here in this plastic bag, there's like a parsnip, or I think it's a parsnip or turnip. I forget. One of those veggies that tastes so good in the soup. It's not cut up though. A lot of times that'll get cut up into little pieces, and that top stem piece will be all that ends up in my worm bins. for the worms to work on. In this case, that whole thing sort of dried out and got nasty, so it's going in as a whole, and I'm curious to see what kind of reaction it gets. The stuff they're getting here is a combination of stuff that I see as fast breakdown food, these carrot peels or carrot shreds, whatever they are. And then right next to it, some stuff that usually in my case takes a little bit longer, which is grapes. These are frozen, otherwise I would puncture them and, you know, sort of pop them. And then the contents of each little grape are more readily exposed to the passerby worms to eat. I'm sprinkling in a little bit of my grit, which is pulverized eggshell. And it's almost like we're putting in a second layer of just more of the same. So, you know what, let's bring in this, to me it seemed like this paper towel was pretty beaten up too. When I reviewed the last check-in on this system, I did sense that there was just way too much paper and stuff lingering out on the top, stuff that would probably do a lot better down low, mixed in with the food. So I wanted to get those things into service, and then those last two pieces of cardboard, like this over here, the paper towel was actually shielding this little worm from all the bright light. So we'll just be left with these couple pieces of cardboard to top things off, rather than all those thin sheets of paper everywhere. Although, no, that's not true, because we are going to hang on to the to these two coffee filters and rest them out on top, you know, so they'll have an opportunity to get seasoned and broken in nicely and turn into something that the worms will readily eat over time. But in the beginning, we'll just use them as sort of feeding zone indicators. So what else? Oh, I thought we'd given them everything, but we've still got what remains in here. So I don't know, do we have to give them more grit? I don't see any harm in sprinkling a little bit more in. What the heck, right? So I mean, with all those coffee filters, paper towels all going in there as extra bedding, I don't know if it's necessary to give them more. Otherwise, I'd be sprinkling in some of my prepared bedding in here on top of the feeding, but I believe we're going to just stick with what we've incorporated into there now, using existing materials that we found through our inspection of the system. And I'm really pleased that we're not needing to add any moisture into here. I wonder if it is good, because I took those sort of preemptive measures to maybe excessively, but at least, you know, pretty thoroughly dampen these edges closer to me, the ones where there's a lot more airflow. So I'm wondering if we would actually benefit from, oops, coming in here with the spray bottle and just dampening this stuff out on the very, very edge a bit. I pumped up my spray bottle. It would seem like a shame not to use it at least a little bit, and it does seem like I felt some dryness down here along this far edge that seems to air out and dry out the most. So I'm going to just go ahead and sort of preemptively dampen this edge over here, just so it doesn't get dry and inhospitable. I really want, you know, worm traffic to be at its maximum everywhere within this bin, so I'm wanting to do my best to keep things nice and damp in here. So that's cool. We took care of a couple of the things that I wanted to do, things that were kind of annoying at me, such as verify that the dryness wasn't recurring here and causing slowdowns in the composting. I don't think that that's the case at all. I'm glad to see that the leftovers were few, and I got a feeling that the dampening of the last check-in helped a lot with getting the composting activity in this started again. It did seem to have stalled out due to the dryness a little bit, at least down through the middle and along those two edges, but that's a good part of the system. But it all seems to be quite damp now and very hospitable. So here's that little guy. Oh no, I thought we released that other little guy we found. This was just another little guy. Took a ride on one of those pieces of cardboard, I believe. But yeah, you know, if it wasn't for this plastic, I think things would be excessively dry in here. But since we are covering up the entire top surface of the material pretty thoroughly with this plastic bag, we are locking in almost all the moisture, with the exception of the little bit that escapes here and there on the edges. But that's acceptable, I believe, because we are getting good results, and I'm glad to see that the bug situation has subsided. So a lot of time there's like a point of no return. You in my worm keeping activities, because I forget things and I tell myself, well, too bad you missed the chance. But it did seem like, well, I've still got a glove on here and we haven't removed the system from the table. We want to get these two filters into service too, right? I had set them aside and I almost forgot. But I'm glad I noticed before we put things away, because that is the end of today's check-in. If I did forget anything else, then it's just going to have to wait till next time. Unless, of course, it's important. So I've got a couple things to clean up and put away here, but I'm not going to keep you around for that because that's boring. Before I go though, really quick, let me say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.